Hey fans, I hope you're all enjoying the program tonight.
You will be a weapon. You will be a minister of death, praying for war.
You're not inside, you are outside, okay?
Sir, I heard it was the best, sir.
It is the best.
The only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Welcome back to the Weekly SITREP. Everyone, Kyle, guest of honor at the Carnegie Mellon Tepper School Veterans Ball.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that. Appreciate the invite from an OG SITREP follower who's now the president of the Vets Club.
Did you have any idea when you were a Tepper student that within, I mean, what has it been, 10 years? 8 years?
6.
6? Okay, I'm aging you.
Yeah.
I forget you were an aviator too, so you know.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah.
6. Okay, well, even more to the fact, 6 years later, did you think you would be the guest of honor back at the Tepper Ball?
No. Well, no. This is the veterans,
Okay.
So I tried doing this when I was president of the Veterans Club, and it didn't go very well. And the reason it didn't go very well is because I had to go fly out for like some interviews, which interfered with it. And I thought there'd be more buy-in from the school, and there wasn't. And so, but like, sounds like they've done a much better job. They said like 200 people are going to be there. So I'm like looking forward to it. And it's going to be at the Soldier and Sailors Memorial, which if you've never been in Pittsburgh, is this like huge like structure. It's like one of the most magnificent structures you'll ever see. It's kind of got some like Roman like vibes to it with like big pillars and everything. And it's a memorial dedicated to it was like initially dedicated to Union soldiers from the Civil War, because obviously like Pennsylvania played like a fairly pivotal like point in like the Civil War. And then like, as you know, the United States is obviously never really stopped having wars. They've kind of like added like, you know, additional monuments to it. But you go inside and it's where they do the graduation for the school, right? For Tepper. And it's this like incredible like stage with the Gettysburg Address like inscribed in like this massive like, you know, rock wall thing. And then like the entire like and then like the rest of the memorial, which is it's inside, is like essentially like a museum that like showcases like the armed services throughout the like you know decades of you know the US's existence. It's super impressive. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, you deserve to be there. I hope the Vets Club puts it on. Yeah, we had something like that at Wharton. Wharton obviously is like almost 900 students, right? So I think like every week there was some sort of formal or like dance or party or something. But the Vets Club Gala was like a legit thing. And my year, there was this big to do about an accounting error within the like student government. So basically like, you know, student government disperses funds to each of the clubs, and it's like a separate account than just like Wharton's general fund. Yeah. And there had been like a QuickBooks sync error with like bill.com. And so it hadn't been registering. And so clubs were like looking at their budgets thinking that they had like hundreds of thousands of dollars more than they had. And by the time they caught it, it was like years later. It was really bad. And so everyone's funds were like zeroed out. So the Vets Club like emailed the school and they're like, hey, it costs us like you know 40 to 50 grand to throw this thing, right? It's like a big party. We had it at the Thomas Jefferson Institute, or excuse me, the Ben Franklin Institute in downtown Philly. Like big deal, right? Like the big bust. It's like the one in National Treasure where he like runs back and forth between it, right? Like the kid like runs back and forth and like reads the stuff and like tells Nicolas Cage. Anyway, we were gonna have it there. We emailed the school. We're like, hey, we can no longer have this event. Like we're gonna do this like scaled down thing. And the school like freaked out because they're like, oh no, this is gonna look really bad that like the Vets Gala is like canceled. So they came back and they're like, we'll fund everything. And you know, we were able to make it happen. But it was pretty cool. So anyway, any big plans before Thanksgiving? Where are you guys? Are you guys going to the South for Thanksgiving?
So yeah, so my Thanksgiving, right, is we're gonna go on a cruise down to the British Virgin Islands, on a Disney cruise, of course. And this gala is on the 21st. We don't go to the 23rd, but we were gonna spend like a day like at Disney on the 22nd for my kids. Yeah, it'd be like a fun thing to do. So I was gonna fly. I was gonna fly on the 22nd there, from Austin to there, but this thing's on the 21st. So like, I guess I'm gonna fly up there, do the thing, and then fly down the 21st by myself down to Orlando, and my wife can figure out how to get the 3 kids to Orlando on our original flight. Which I like.
Fun.
Yeah, I was like, "Are you okay with this?" I'm like, "Totally okay for you to say no." Like, she's like, "No, go do it. I want you to go do it." I'm like, "All right, well, there we go." The other thing I'm doing is, I know I was talking with you about this, is I'm going to go out to Emory here in early November for their Salute to Service event.
Yeah.
And I'm like the keynote speaker for their MBV program. And so I got to figure out what exactly I'm going to speak about.
We can't spoil it here.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'll be anxiously awaiting to see what that happens. I'm actually going up to the same thing. SITREPs will be represented in LA. There's like a big LA veterans event that USC Marshall and UCLA Anderson are putting on next week on the 17th. I'm going to be up there in LA for that up in Westwood. So that's exciting. So SITREPs, if you guys want us at your events, we may or may not be able to come because we do have full-time jobs. We do know what the hell we're talking about because we actually work at real companies. But that does infringe upon our ability to, be everywhere all at once. So
That's right. We greatly enjoy it when people want us to be there, and we really appreciate it. So we do try to make it.
exactly. Well, today we wanted to cover some news stories. Obviously, there's a lot going on. Unfortunately, we will not be breaking down the vice presidential debate. I'm sure you can all go and find that somewhere else. As funny as many one-liners and memes that came out of that from both JD Vance and Tim Walz. This will be the only vice presidential debate. I know some people were saying that there were some vets that were trying to schedule a debate between Tim Walz and JD Vance, and of course that's an insane idea. So
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
Imagine thinking that those two were going to not do exactly what was in their campaign's best interests. It's like so naive to like even think that could ever happen. It's just
Exactly.
Like, how money is at stake? How much? Like it's insane. It's like
So-
a really thing.
We will talk about China's nuclear submarine sunk. Their top one, which is a pretty big deal because they're obviously trying to catch up with us, and our subs are really kind of the crowning achievement of our naval force. Next, we're going to talk about the man and the legend in Argentina, Javier Milei, ended rent control, and would you not guess it, but prices went down, rent supply went up in Argentina. So we'll talk a little bit about that because we've heard discussions in our own country about rent control. And then we're going to jump into a discussion about Harvard and colleges throughout the South and the SEC, where Kyle's adopted family, or his wife's family, right, is from. And then finish up with a discussion about what's going on at the ports, and the worst financial advice you've ever heard was detailed in the Wall Street Journal. Unfortunately, a lot of people hear this advice, follow it, and like the dentist in this story, get possibly indicted. So we'll tell you how to avoid being indicted. But first, Kyle, talk to us about what happened in China, in Wuhan of all places, actually.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That was like the notable thing is it was in Wuhan, which I didn't even know Wuhan was like a port. Shows how much I know about Chinese geography. Yeah, so the Chinese are desperately trying to build like a serious blue water navy. Obviously, like the U.S. has the premier blue water navy in the
And blue
world.
water, for those that don't understand what a blue water navy is. Like what is a blue what's a
you want me to
blue
explain?
water navy? Right.
Yeah,
Like they
like
have
one that can go like across the ocean, one that allows you to project force like very far away. So like, when you think of blue water navy, you're thinking of like aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates, submarines, supply, and the logistics
you have the
chain.
supply chain. You have the supply chain to
Yeah.
extend, which is insane, right? To actually like think about extending your force, right? Because like Mexico has a navy, but it's basically like
It's a coast guard.
defense.
Yeah.
Right, it's a coast guard. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's not like, hey, we're gonna project like power, on the other side of the world, like very credible, like deterrent level power on the other side of the world. And so China wants to build this, right?
But by the way, here's Wuhan. You're right. It's inland, but I think that just the river systems in China, like these are just so big, right? Like
Wow,
you can get out to the ocean, I'm guessing, that way. So basically it's like Wuhan, yes, is not anywhere close to the ocean, but I guess that's where they build the ports, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, so anyway, the Chinese have
look at that river. That's crazy.
a submarine that they were a nuclear submarine. And I don't think this is their first one, but it was like their most advanced one, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're trying to catch up, and it was docked, right? So it's in the water, but they were like working on it. They're getting it ready to be operational, and then like something happened and it like sank, and so they're not sure if like a fire happened.
The only way we knew that was like some guy you have these guys with crazy hobbies. There's like a guy that like watches satellite imagery of Chinese ports, and he like noticed that there was a bunch of cranes on the dock and that the submarine was no longer there. And he's like, oh, they must have sunk. And of course, China was like, no, like there's no sinkage, and it leaked. That yes, it did in fact sink.
Yeah. So they had like satellite images of it, and notable is that it had its like nuclear reactors on, but I don't think they were like fully revved up. And so I don't know, it's very embarrassing. And of course, like the PLA like completely like denies it. And it's like, no, there's nothing to see here, when of course there is like something very easy to see. So it's just like super embarrassing to have that happen to them. And everybody kind of like got a good laugh at them about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. We talk, obviously we're Army guys, and we like to give the Navy crap, but like the ability of our Navy is insane and frankly unparalleled across the ocean, like across the world. And that's the way that our Navy has made it so that like you can have global trade, that like you can have a car with like a Korean computer infrastructure with Taiwanese chips running on, cobalt that is from Africa, or gasoline from the Middle East, or Mexico or Canada, right? Like it's pretty amazing. China obviously wants to be able to project power into most notably the South China Sea, right? And make it so that they have the ability to figure out the defenses around Taiwan. Submarines are super important for that, because your submarine can be 2,000, 3,000 feet below the ocean and barely detectable. And in our case, we have submarines that can surface up to, I think it's like 400 or 500 feet below the surface and launch nukes, right?
Yeah.
So super hard to, basically we can, it's very difficult to call our bluff, because like if you're in Iran, that there's probably like a boomer American submarine sitting off the coast, and within like 5 minutes, Tehran could have like 8 nuclear warheads inside.
One of my good friends here in the neighborhood is a former naval officer. He was a backseater in fighter aircraft. He did like 25 years in the Navy, and so obviously he had achieved things other than just being a backseater in the back of fighter aircraft. And he was explaining to me, he's basically like the strategies to always have like ships like out in certain parts of the world. And so like you would have like a carrier like group, right? Like in the Pacific, and then like another carrier group would like leave, and they do like 3-month cruises, right? I think they do longer ones now because they're stretched thin, but would like leave from Pearl Harbor would like relieve this other carrier group, and there'd be like a change. So there's always be like a continuous presence there. And the same thing with like submarines and everything. So there's always like a forward deployed presence. And so it's just part of that like power projection where like the United States is like always there. Kind of like you were saying.
And China, like, for as much as they've tried to copy, for as much industrial supply as they have, the tech that's required on a nuclear submarine is still too much for them to figure out, which is pretty amazing, right? It speaks to like, we give crap to like jobs about, people post those jobs, right? Like must be a SOF or a submariner or an aviator. And it's like kind of dumb, right? Because there's plenty of people that were infantry officers that are bright or that were, logisticians or Air Force, techs. But it does require like a lot of know-how and intelligence and attention to detail to be a submarine, submariner, submarine pilot. It's not a pilot, right? I don't want to say a driver, but a submariner, right?
Yeah, I mean, because they have like the way it was explained to me when I've met sub guys is like Admiral Rickover. I'm probably not pronouncing it right. Like basically set like an impossibly high standard for submariners to like basically reach to ensure that there never was basically like a meltdown on a submarine in the middle of the ocean. Like you didn't have like like a nuclear meltdown, right? And so the sort of like trials that they go through are just like super intensive, right? And like they split their days into 3, so it's like 6 hours working, 6 hours resting, 6 hours like doing like administrative stuff and studying. So like they're and like as a pilot, right? Like a big part of being a pilot in any part of the armed forces, and I'm sure in civilian aviation, like professionally, is you study a lot. You like just because you're done with flight school doesn't mean you stop studying. You're always studying, right? You're studying systems of the aircraft, emergency procedures, operations, like how to navigate in the airspace, etc. And I'm sure like the submarine thing is like probably pretty similar, where you're always like studying on it and you're being tested.
Yeah. Well, it's like a helicopter. Any deviation from absolutely correct will kill you.
Well, I mean, like there's deviations, right? But like there's like
sure, but it's dangerous. Like if you like mess it up, like there's very little room for error, right?
Yeah, it's the way it's always put to me, right, is it's not hard, but it's unforgiving.
Right. Which is the same thing for a submarine, right?
Yeah,
like you screw up on a submarine, like you're like 1,000 to 2,000 feet under the ocean, and you just like you die, right? Like
my old boss, he was the CEO of my company when I worked at Acme General Corp. He'd been a submariner, and he told us this story one time if they were like crossing the Pacific or something. I don't know if they're going to Hawaii or whatever. Maybe they're going to Australia. I forget exactly, but he was telling me that like, or maybe they're going to Japan. Either way, they were in the middle of the ocean, and they're like in the submarine, and the skipper does something that basically causes the there's some like emergency that happens, and the skipper makes a decision that basically causes like the nuclear reactor to go out, to go offline. So like imagine like you're, like you said, 2,000 feet underneath the water, and like the nuclear reactor goes out, and they had to do like basically like an emergency restart. And the way you do the restart, right, is obviously if you're starting a nuclear reactor, there's probably like a series of like highly choreographed like steps that you need to follow and like measure and make sure you're doing it right. Like we all watched Chernobyl, right? It's a great show.
Or Hunt for Red October or any of those, yeah.
Yeah. And it basically said like the way they went about it was so like quick that there was a really high chance for something to go wrong. And they got the reactor started, and they were able to like get power back to the submarine. They're like, as soon as they got to port, the guy was like relieved, because they're like, no, like we can't, like this is like you screwed up. You're like your judgment was like went off the rails. Yeah. So, but like more to the point with China, right, is the U.S. Navy is it the second oldest branch, or is it like third? I don't know. They've been around a long time, right? The Army is the oldest branch.
Yeah, it's like the 18. I mean, Thomas Jefferson like sent the Navy right to Tripoli.
Yeah,
fight the pirates, right.
So like the U.S. Navy has a tradition that goes back like 300 years, something like that. China doesn't have that naval tradition. China doesn't have that blue water.
Founded 1775.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So So they're desperately trying to develop this like seamanship like tradition that just requires time to do. It requires time, operational rigor. It requires
they've never fought a war, mind you.
they've never fought an actual like we went through. Yeah, the U.S. Navy's gone through like lots.
The U.S. military, yes, the Chinese military like threw literal men with sticks at our soldiers in North Korea and pushed us back, right? Literally like threw more bodies than we had bullets. After that, they've never fought a war. It's a police state, and they don't really have a lot of experience. That's kind of the thing that people say about any conflict in Taiwan for China is like they have no professional NCO corps, they have no experience planning, and in this case, they don't have anyone with experience on these systems.
They have no Admiral Nimitz. They have no folks who've like
Patton, Eisenhower, guys that like grew up in war, right?
Yeah, or guys that went through like insanely like crazy like situations with war, right? And then post-war imparted those lessons on the military, right? So that the next time it happened, like the military would be better prepared. That's why we have like when they came out of the 80s, you had those big 5 systems, right? The Apache, the Abrams, the Bradley, like all these different systems, right? Where it's like,
right.
Folks that went through a generational conflict are able to say, okay, like thinking forward,
Right.
the war of the future, here's how we should do things differently because we have all this like lived experience. And
that's one thing that people have said about like Russia, right? Is they're like, hey, if we can't defeat Russia, like there is actually a case for this making Russia a more prominent, like if we can't defeat Russia and Ukraine, they're going to be a more formidable foe because you now have an entire army that understands how to fight a peer-to-peer fight.
Yeah. I mean,
But China doesn't have that, and this like kind of lays that bare.
Exactly right. So yeah, but anyway, I mean, we can wrap this one up. But basically, like they had this big disaster, and it's just part of the the teething of their navy, right? And like, I mean, they'll learn from this, So
they recovered the sub. I mean, it's gonna go out. Like it's not done forever. But yeah, so we'll wrap that up. We'll move on to Javier Milei. This guy's absolutely wild. So I did not pick this topic, but I do love Argentina. I lived there for a couple of years, serving like on like a service mission. I lived in the north, not in Buenos Aires, but I did visit Buenos Aires and love the country. It has been the most sclerotic, poorly governed mess for the past really like 100 years. And people don't realize that at the turn of the century, they had a GDP per capita and like an overall economy that was equivalent to America.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the promise of the new world.
Yeah, and they had like very abundant natural resources.
A beautiful country. It looks like America. Like it's like full of glaciers and mountains, and like it's an immigrant country. Like it's like 97% Caucasian or European descent. It's very similar to America.
Yeah, like you look like Buenos Aires. It looks like Paris, like almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, I picked this one because my buddy just went there, and he's like, oh, you could get an apartment, like a nice apartment could be like $200 or whatever. But their inflation is out of control, as I know you're well aware.
It has been, right? I mean, it's been out of control. Well, they also switched their currency around the year 2000. Their currency collapsed. They defaulted on like close to like, I think it was like $200 or $300 million in debt. It was like the biggest sovereign wealth default ever. Now the Argentine peso, and they never really addressed the underlying causes of the inflation, namely insane government spending, massive tariffs, massive export. They put fees on exports, so you can't export your goods. It's very protectionist, very fascist, and hyper taxation. I mean, it's like impossible to do business there.
Yeah.
So inflation got to like 40% monthly, literally. My friends down there would talk about going to the store at the start of the month, buying everything you possibly could, because by the end of the month you couldn't afford, from your last paycheck. So pretty nuts. And Milei was actually like not even an opposing party. He like formed his own party, and he's like a true libertarian. Like he's like right of anyone that we've had in America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and so his idea is basically like he wanted to slash like basically like he wanted to unshackle the economy from regulation. And so what this article was saying was that like people talk about like rent control in the United States, like, oh, we should have like rent control to like prevent like rising rents. Well, like, you know, government intervention, right? Subsidies, distortions, it creates all these weird economic like effects in the in the economy, right? If you like put on rent control, right, creates like weird incentives for people to do things with like their houses, like not put them on the market, etc. And so
Or builders aren't going to build houses.
Yeah, they don't have
right.
they don't have, there's not an incentive to, right?
Right.
They're like, well, if I know you can only make this much money, like, why would I, like,
or you shift the cost, right? You shift it to like a key fee or a cleaning, you shift it to like, something besides rent, right? In New York City, that's like there's like the infamous like, key charge and mail charge and things like building maintenance charge. It's like you can raise rent, artificially, right?
mm-hmm.
But it also like limits supply, where like you can get people into a rent controlled apartment in New York City where like, you might go find like a 5-bedroom apartment in New York City that's rent controlled for the same price as like a 2-bedroom, get it. But like, that really shouldn't be where you live. That should be where like, you shouldn't be augmenting the market, because then it makes a shortage for everyone else. Anyway, that's what happened in Argentina.
So Milei basically was like, no, we're gonna get rid of rent control. And what the Wall Street Journal has at least said is it's increased vastly the supply of available apartments or available places to rent. And I don't think it's like decreased like how much it costs yet, but like the idea is that eventually it will, right?
It has actually.
Oh, okay.
I'll pull up the chart here. Hold on. Okay, so you see here, those that are watching, rental supply changed from a year ago, right? Skyrocketed. And of course, it's like the rate of change is going down because there was already like a massive increase. Like the supply massively increased. Like the real price of rental properties like got to this point where Milei was like, we need to stop doing rent control, right? And you see the real price, like inflation adjusted, it's dropping, right?
Indeed it is. Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense, right? You increase like supply, it's what was it like the market, the supply and demand, the market clearing, price, right? Like the two are going to meet. So it seems so obvious, right? Like, I don't know, like it's so weird that people like can get their heads wrapped around that. It's not a good thing. I'm always like,
we have this, I mean, again, I promised we wouldn't get into the VP debate, just because I don't think it's super substantive. But I did see the moderator ask JD Vance a question, and directed towards Tim Walz too, where she's like, "Can you explain how immigrants coming into the country would raise the price of houses?" And like, whether you want immigration or not, right? I happen to think that a level of immigration is good, but leaving that point aside, it seems pretty big. Like, I would hope that the host of a newscast would get the fact that, like, hey, if we don't increase the supply of housing and we increase the demand, the price will go up. And like, she asked that of JD Vance, and he actually didn't say like, well, supply, like this is a basic supply and demand question. But we also have, questions like we have this from, Kamala Harris. Her economic policy is like very like, we're going to stop price gouging, right? By putting price controls on goods. And, we see it on both sides because it's a very popular idea, right? It's very similar to tariffs, right? If we tax the tariffs, like, they're going to pay for it. It's like, no, it's going to cascade to everyone. But you see Kamala Harris talking about capping prices. All it does is limit.
It's rent control.
It's rent control for food.
It's I don't know. There's just so much like detachment from like economic, like just common sense. I don't know. It's so frustrating.
So what we have though is like a real life study that Milei has cut the federal government in half in Argentina. It was crazy. Like people think it was like here. It was so nuts. Like the systems and the departments, they had like 20 states sponsored TV stations there that did sports, like for soccer. It was crazy when I was there. I was like, I'm gonna pay for all this. And he's cut it all, and he kind of warned people like, hey, at first there's going to be some shock, right? But it's going to enliven, like it's going to enrich the economy. We're going to have more investment, and it's working. Like you saw the chart, like there's more supply, more people can get houses, and they're cheaper. Inflation is coming down. So we'll wait and see. I mean, it'll be a few years before we really know. But Milei is like, he kind of was the answer to like, Argentina was on its like death's door economically, like thinking about a debt default, and they were like, "Well, I guess we'll try libertarianism."
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see like where they go, and like how long he gets like how like far that they let him take it.
Yeah, I mean, eventually people
Everybody
are always
gets
like
politicians.
There's always the allure of this, there's always a siren song being sung, right? From government spending. And we always want to believe that we can just make it so, the landlords are evil. And if we just stop them from from profiting, that'll be good. I mean, I don't know. It's very frustrating to see how many people don't understand supply and demand. But speaking of increasing supply, you shared an article with me about Southern schools.
Oh yeah.
This was pretty. I thought the increase would be kind of like negligible. A lot of kids going to Southern schools.
So I mentioned this to my wife, and what she said was, "Oh well, it's because of sorority TikTok." And the article does mention that, right? And so basically what this article says is that there's been a massive increase in the interest of going to like schools in the South, right? So like Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, Ole Miss.
84% increase in the number of Northerners going to Southern public schools over the past 2 years. 80%, 84%. That's like double, right?
Yeah, and they said that like the factors were essentially, oh well, one, folks don't want to be cold, right? And you and I, having both gone to school,
oh, it's brutal. It sucks.
Are well acquainted with how much that sucks. Two, this is probably very true. Also, the divisive politics at like some of the elite schools, right in the Northeast, right, where everything's like there's like a lot of social justice. There's a lot of like.
Well, I wouldn't even call it divisive. It's just the stifled. I mean,
You're right.
the lack of expression, right? That it's like, I mean, Penn, my second alma mater, Wharton's got a lot of play in the last couple debates because like everyone's arguing over who Wharton's like study supports, right? Which is kind of wild to me, like to hear all these presidential candidates like arguing about Wharton.
Yeah, it is pretty funny.
So I like seeing my alma mater get to play, but of course, Kamala Harris says, "Oh, Wharton says my plan's better," right? And like Donald Trump, I don't even like know who's making these like studies. It's like kind of funny being a student, like who's like doing the studies, but I believe they're a thing. Donald Trump, of course, is like, no, Wharton supports me. This professor, Katie Milkman, I've heard good things about her class. I think she's probably a nice person. I don't know her, but she tweets out the next day. She's like, "What is Trump talking about? I know 0 faculty members that support this man." And I was like, that's actually not like whether you like him personally, it shouldn't be a brag that, hey, this university, every single professor here thinks the same way politically. It was kind of a damning thing for her to say. I thought, I was like, that's a real self-own. Like universities should not be saying, we all hate this man and we all disagree, for no other reason than it's like your students should not be deprived of a perspective that like at least 45 to 47% of Americans share, if not fit. Like, we'll see what happens in November, but like a little less than half the voting public supports Donald Trump. The fact that universities in the Northeast, that Penn is like not a single professor here supports this man. Now, probably one or two at least do, but they don't want to say it, right? That's pretty damning to be like, your students will come here and not get the perspective, not understand the perspective of like half of the voting public. I think that is a big reason, right? I saw it while I was at Wharton.
Yeah, I mean, groupthink on colleges is a real thing, right? So you're never surprised, right? It's almost like like you step out of line, like you get like whacked, right? And the colleges like will end up enforcing or like supporting like they want. This is why they want to get out of the whole like politics and like it's so divisive. It forces people into camps, right? And then the school takes a side, essentially saying that like, well, this is the party line, and if you step out of this, you're gonna get punished for doing that, right? And it's where it should be. The institution should be free to work there. It should be like open expression and they should be able to say what they think and like try to seek like absolute truth instead of truth. Maybe that's the way to put it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like this is talking about like, hey, like, yeah, so there's a lot of like, if you go to a school in the Northeast, right, it's pretty guaranteed that you're probably going to see a lot of, you're going to be subjected to this kind of like politicization and like intense like protests and everything over various like issues, right? And a lot of people don't want to deal with that. Like they want to go to college and like have a good time and like learn and like party and like hang out with the opposite sex or the same sex, I guess, whatever you're into. And they want to they're like, why would I go to this school in the Northeast where there's a bunch of people who are just fucking pissed at each other all the time and it's cold, or I go to University of Alabama and go to football games and like hang out in sororities and
you go to Auburn. It seems like a pretty fun place from your pictures.
Oh yeah, it looks like it's an awesome time. Like
we went to the opposite of a fun college, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually do think there's some similarities, right? Where it's like, yeah, West Point sucks, right? But like, it doesn't suck when you can drink and it's football season, and you're an upperclassman. It's actually, I thought it was pretty fine, right?
There was a lot of fun times. I don't know. My first year, we had this insane comm lady that like made us like do patrol bases in Central area on Saturdays. It was the stupidest fucking thing ever. Yeah, she was so stupid. She like was the first brigadier general. I don't care if she's listening. I'll tell her to her face. Like she was terrible. And she was like the first comm to like not get a like a follow-on hire assignment. It was such bullshit. Anyway, you can feel my frustration. They call it like AC weekends or something. It's the dumbest thing ever.
We had AC weekends as well, but like
we had them like every other weekend. It was super dumb.
Well,
anyway.
like West Point will also like we're a college to like we're a military school. They can't like figure out where they want. There's like a happy medium, right? Where it's like but at the end of the day, it's like,
they like made us like go do patrol bases in Central area. It was stupid. It was like,
guys, they can do patrol bases at Ranger School, which is where like half these fucking people are going to go if they it's like if they really want to go do that, they can like go branch infantry, and they also get to do it during Buckner. So, it's like, why do we need to like do it like in the middle of the school year when you should be having fun? But, West Point is undefeated in fucking cadet summer. So,
I will say you're right. Like, I did feel like continuously that West Point did represent like both sides. Like, I felt like I had professors that would push me and be like, hey, if you're going to argue a conservative point, I'm going to force you to like consider the liberal position. If you're a liberal, like, I think that it was definitely more right of center than like Penn or Harvard, but like I did feel like there was enough representation of both sides.
I mean, they brought Noam Chomsky to come talk to us for our philosophy when everybody had to take philosophy. Yeah. They also had Jack Bogle to talk to us about like.
And we had John Mearsheimer come. I think John Mearsheimer's a grad, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah. So, but like, I felt like the academic representation there was very like fair and balanced. So I never felt like I was being like pushed to one side. I felt like I came out and had a much broader sense of like inquiry and like than I would have if I had maybe gone to like another school. But more to the point, and back to what we were talking about in the original article, it's like, yeah, folks want to go to these southern schools because basically they want to have like a normal college experience, not one where there's fucking crazy protesters screaming the entire time and they can't. They're afraid to say something without getting their dick slammed in the door. Yeah, so I don't know. It's just interesting, right? And I think it just goes to show that the kind of like it's like this, flight to like freedom, I guess. Either way I'd put it.
yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, yeah, maybe the weather. I mean, I'm in Southern California, and I get like everyone I talk to is like, yeah, it's more expensive. It's like, it's like hyper regulated, but like, damn, is the weather not enough to like. I don't meet anyone that's like, yeah, I'm thinking about leaving, right? People pay a lot of money to stay here, and I think the weather's a big piece of it. We talked about that. February at West Point.
Yeah, I wouldn't call the weather in the South great, right? Like,
but like, also most kids aren't there in the summer. Like kids come back end of August, right? Beginning of September. Like the worst months, they're not on campus, right? They're like at home.
Yeah, they get like a month and a half of probably like weather that's like moderately like uncomfortable.
But like you compare, I mean, I just remember how bad February was at West Point.
Oh yeah,
like
okay.
just like sad. And even at Wharton, I mean, I had a lot more fun at Wharton, but like even at Wharton, it was like February was kind of like, oh man, this is like dreary. Like NBA, you could like travel and we'd go to like other places, but it was definitely not like Alabama or Florida. That's for sure.
I mean, I would when I lived in Chicago, right? I would leave Chicago and go places that were warm. I would like land, and the first thing I would think to myself is, "What am I doing to myself?"
Yeah.
Like
it's one of the reasons you left, right?
I was like, why am I doing this to myself? This sucks, like this, like I can make this all go away if I want. So, but yeah, SEC schools, it just means more apparently.
Yeah. Well, going back to the Northeast and the South, I guess too. What's going on with these longshoremen? First of all, Jimmy Hoffa. I swore I saw it. His name's actually Harold Daggett. He's the president of the International Longshoremen's Association. A longshoreman is like someone that works at the port, right? They like operate the cranes and
they do port stuff. Yeah. They run the port.
Harold Daggett. People are wondering, like, go watch the video on SITREP's Instagram. Like, what's going on there?
So I saw that video and I was like, this dude is a fucking mob boss. And so I had no idea. Maybe just a good way to baseline here. I had no idea how much longshoremen make. Apparently, they make a ton of money. Something like something.
And they're bargaining to basically like double their pay.
Yeah, like so as a baseline, right? Like maybe I should pull up the like per hour number, but the total loaded comp that I saw was that like longshoremen were making something like $230K plus like $90K in benefits, right?
Right, like pensions and all sorts of
So they're making really, 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 really good money, and they don't work that hard. They get paid even when they don't work, right? Because they have like a killer fucking union. Run by this guy who basically looks like he could be the character in The Sopranos. And this stretches all up and down the East Coast, right? So I think it goes down
all over to Texas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Both ports and East Coast ports. Yeah.
And this guy like makes like $900K or something. He drives a Bentley.
He makes about $900,000 a year.
He has a 75
yachts and
yacht, you know.
That we know of. He makes 900K that we know of.
Yeah, that you know of. Yeah, I think he's probably making more than that. And he they were being offered like an increase of like 40 or 50. They were being offered like a substantial increase in wages, and they wanted even more. And so there's
50% pay increase offered over 6 years.
Yeah.
So not, so yearly, what is, that's 50% from now. I mean, that's like 10% per year, roughly, or like 7 or 8% per year. Most jobs will give you like maybe 1 or 2%, right? You're lucky if you have a job that will give you cost like CPI adjusted.
Yeah.
So they're demanding a 77% pay raise, and that would take them to 69 an hour, which that sounds like an Elon Musk like negotiation. But they're demanding to go to $69 an hour.
Yeah, and I mean they're getting it's like it's a crazy amount of money, and so they basically like put a gun to the head of the American economy and was like, give us our money or not, or we're basically gonna shut this country down. And he brought up the whole Taft-Hartley Act, where he's saying like, yeah, they have Taft-Hartley, which is basically because like back like several decades ago, right, union bosses pretty much had like a stranglehold in the U.S. economy. They could bring the U.S. economy to a halt. And so they put in the Taft-Hartley Act to basically say like they could bust up a strike. There'd be like a 90-day cooling off period. But people could go to work, but then they could basically like do malicious compliance and drop their productivity down, to where like work was getting done, but on magnitudes less than where it actually should be done.
Right.
And so he's basically saying, he said this, right, which I thought he's like, yeah, you can bring us back for Taft-Hartley, and we'll go down from like processing like 80 containers a day to processing 8 or something, like something crazy like that. And and I don't know how it's going to work out, like, and then
and one of the other big things, one of the other big things is fear of automation. So they're saying, look, we don't want to have our jobs replaced, right? We want to be guaranteed. And this was the writer's strike in Hollywood. There was a big thing about this. Like, we don't want AI, So they're like, hey, we don't want to. Frankly, in my opinion, that's like, I've seen some Twitter commentators that are like, give them what they want and then automate like crazy, like, which is probably the move, right? I mean,
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because on like one hand, you could look at it and you could say, yeah, they're going to automation is going to continue whether or not these guys get paid, right? Will automation go faster, right? Because they'll say, okay, well, now we really want to get rid of these guys, right? Or so that's like part of their contract is they want to basically make it where they can't automate. I don't know how, like, I don't understand how feasible that is. I don't understand how like the kind of like contract like
it seems pretty ridiculous. Like, I think most Americans are being exposed to this and they're like, this is really dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're paying you a bunch of money for a substandard product compared to even, I mean, people were talking about the productivity in ports like the Congo and Madagascar, and it's like better, right? And I mean, China probably has some stuff, something to do with that, but it's still like a shame that it's like basically most ports in the world operate better than the US, and we're now being told we have to pay more for worse products. And it's like a lot more, right? It's not like, hey, give these guys a living wage, right? Johnny down at the port's making 40 grand a year. Like, these guys are making like 200 grand a year, right? Working like 35 to 40 hours a week with pensions and full healthcare. Like, it's like you're justified in calling it extortion.
Yeah, essentially. And I don't know how it's going to play to say, because like it's going to come out like you guys, like I had no idea they were making that much. And be like, okay, so maybe you want to make $400,000 a year, right?
It's
like,
the average pay will be over $230,000 a year.
It's insane. It's like, screw going to an MBA, go be a longshoreman.
Yeah, work and get a pension. It's like way better than the military. It's like, man, why go to the military? Like, go be a longshoreman.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's remarkable, and I was just like not expecting this, but
well, Anyway, we will see what ends up happening. Important that it gets done. People don't realize how much stuff comes in on boats, cars, raw equipment, raw materials, food. A lot of things comes in and out. It's really bad. Like this, it's fair to say that they're extorting the U.S. economy. Final discussion. We wanted to just kind of wrap up with a warning to people who spend too much time following the advice of Instagram and TikTok financial advisors. Kyle, talk about the worst financial advice I've ever, seen a sophisticated person, mind you, follow.
Yeah, so it's basically this. Of course, it's a dentist. It's always the dentists that are getting into trouble here. In my
it's always the medical people that their ceiling's really low, right? Like their floor is really high and their ceilings are low because they don't, it's like you're highly paid hourly wage employee, and so they get frustrated because they're like, man, I went to school for a long time. I make like a lot, but not like fuck me.
Their leverage is like not very good, right? It's good. It's good on like for the amount of work that they put in, it's probably not good, but it is still pretty good.
Well, and you can't ever get mailbox money, right?
Yeah, that's the problem. You have to go to work, right?
You have to work. You're a highly paid hourly wage employee. I mean, I know, like dentists and doctors will be like, we're not hourly wage employees. Like you kind of are, right? Like you do a service and you get paid for it.
Yeah, so, and you're highly dependent on finding more employees or more customers for what your service, right? So you see all these dentists are fucking hustlers. Like the dentist up the street here runs a fucking he runs a spin studio in addition to being he and his wife in addition to being dentists.
Trying to find it right. And they're always like they don't have business training, right? They've been to school for a long time doing like biology and stuff. So, yeah, it's always like dentists and doctors, right?
Yeah, my neighbor's a dentist and we're talking to him about like EBITDA and stuff. So what this article was talking about was basically this dentist got in a lot of trouble by the IRS and is going to have to pay a lot of money in addition to some like criminal penalties because he had basically used an elaborate series of like trusts to make it to where he paid no tax, right? And so the idea is like, and you'll see this on Instagram. I don't see it as much anymore, but I still see some of it. And it's like all these guys are like, well, they'll be like writing out like, here's how like I've structured my my family, right? And they'll have like these elaborate series of like LLCs and trusts that basically like feed into each other to obfuscate like where like basically so they don't have an income, right?
Well, and they don't think the thing to talk about with this guy. He didn't think that he was doing it criminally. This wasn't like they're not charging him with like wire fraud. They're charging him with tax evasion, right? So the intent, as far as we can tell, was not, he clearly didn't want to pay taxes, but it wasn't like pure fraud, right? He wasn't like literally misrepresenting his business. He wasn't money laundering. He made this trust and like basically said, my salary from my dentist office gets paid to the trust. The trust then pays me. And because the trust is a separate entity, anything that it pays is tax deductible as a business expense, basically, of like the trust, like an LLC. So the trust paid the mortgage. The trust bought the groceries. He didn't buy any groceries. Therefore, or he didn't get any money, right? He only got the remainder from the trust. And he didn't get any money, right? So he doesn't pay any taxes. And he thinks that it's legal because he had a random dude tell him that this is doable.
Or he has,
right?
he has a bunch of formation documents and everything, but like the IRS takes a look at this and they go, this is all bullshit. They go, these are not real businesses. These are shell companies, right? These are not real. They're not functioning in like the spirit and letter of the law. And so they'll find a way to pierce those LLCs and trusts and say what you're doing is tax evasion, because that's what you are fucking doing. Is you're doing tax evasion, right? And so you see this on like social media, right, where these people, they want to sell you like different ways to like set up these basically like tax shelters that are not legal in any way, shape, or form. And some of the even like in particularly like cringe ones I've seen. I saw one this morning, and this guy was talking about oh, the smartest thing I ever did was marry my wife, who's not a citizen of the United States, and so she has multiple passports. So we have a bunch of LLCs in her name, right? And all the money from our businesses go through. Like they basically admit to this, like publicly, what they're doing, right? And like all the money goes through her LLCs in Dubai, which then go to like a trust, right? And then we get the money, and so we don't have, and so it's untouchable.
Right.
And
Which
it's like,
TLDR, if you make money in the U.S., you pay U.S. taxes.
yeah, like
And
no.
actually, you're depending on where you're from, you might be subject to global taxation. If like also, if you make money overseas and you're a U.S. citizen, you will be subject to U.S. taxation.
Yeah.
You know, so just for listeners out there that think that like, you know, think about taking a job somewhere else, like you will pay U.S. taxes. It might be less, but like you will pay global taxes. So if you go and work in Saudi Arabia or Dubai, and you make 500 grand, you don't keep 500 grand. You will pay U.S. federal income tax.
Yeah,
And
there
maybe state tax.
yeah, there was, I wish I could remember this dude's name, but he was like, this was maybe like a year ago, but he was all, was it like Moby or something? But he's like writing on a whiteboard. He's like, here's how I have everything structured, like la la la. And I just took one look at him like, this is just a fucking, it's a bunch of bullshit. Oh yeah, Pace Morby, that's who it is. This dude just makes stuff up. Pace Morby, YouTuber. There we go. He's like all like he's a real estate investor, of course. And he taught, and like he was doing all these advertisements and how to basically like how to like set up, do tax evasion, right? And it never like it never like fails to like amaze me that these people don't think this is not going to get them in trouble.
Well, one thing that I always hear too is like, form an LLC even if you don't make any money, and just like deduct costs, right? So like form an LLC that's like house management LLC, and like, you know, pay the $600, form it up, and then like deduct a third of your rent, right? Deduct your meals, you know, between these hours, deduct your vacations if you're like, and like all you have to do is like form the LLC and you can deduct taxes. It's like, no, if you don't have a real business, you can't deduct taxes. Now, I will say, if you want to know the best way to avoid taxes, which tax avoidance is not illegal. Tax avoidance is what every American seeks to do.
I think it'd be like tax reduction, legal ways.
Tax reduction. Well, yeah, I had a professor that said tax evasion is criminal. Tax avoidance is your patriotic duty. So those two terms, right? You can avoid taxes. Like, you know, anyone that like no one doesn't try to avoid taxes, right? Everyone tries to get their maximum tax return. You know, which is always why it makes me mad when people are like, oh, these politicians or these millionaires don't pay, you know, they pay less taxes. It's like, well, so does like normal people, right? We all try to deduct things as much as we can. But if you are an entrepreneur, even if you're like running an Etsy shop, if you do have a real business, there are legitimate ways to to reduce your taxes. And it does include things like, you know, you can deduct your meals that you eat while working. You can deduct part of your rent. Talk to a real professional, or at least ask ChatGPT if you think that you should deduct something. But I would just even like call a CPA and ask like, what can you deduct? Because there are some interesting deductions. There are some other things.
Yeah, like if you run a business, right? Like there are things that you can spend money on that will probably benefit you, but will also count as tax deductions for your business. And it's just the way the
right. And it can be small. Like it can be an Etsy shop that like, you know, you can be a bread shop that like makes treats for your neighbors.
Yeah, but you know, but like the idea that you could use like this Pace Morby's guide, prime corporate services, to set up this elaborate like construction of LLCs and trusts to shield your money effectively, where you as an individual aren't getting, you know, even though you are benefiting from all of this money, but like the LLCs are technically like it's not. Yeah. You know, and they're saying like money that's held in trust that isn't actually your, like that's the whole thing, right? When it's in a trust, right? Like it benefits that person, but they don't actually own it, so they don't get hit with the taxation of it. So,
right, and there are ways, you know, talk to our friend Henry Preston, right, on LinkedIn. He'll tell you if you can or cannot. Talk to a CPA, right? If you're working on your business 5 hours a week, you probably can't deduct a third of your rent, right? If you're working on your business like 80 hours a week, you might be able to deduct half your rent. Like, who knows, right? If you're doing business at your house, mind you, right? But like, I have friends that are entrepreneurs that run a really successful business selling products to lash artists, and they have like 7 figures in revenue. This is their full-time job. And they were like telling me that like their CPA was telling them things that they took a vacation to Hawaii with like their friends that also work at the company with them. And they were like, oh, for sure we can deduct part of this, right? And the CPA was like, no, unless you have minutes from meetings at least once a day, unless you can show like, email timestamps that show that you were like working, like you're not deducting jack shit from this little excursion to Oahu. And that kind of surprised them. They were like, oh, okay, well, we're going to do what you say because we don't want to get audited and go to prison. But they do deduct quite a few things, right? And they do have their business buy cars and stuff. But, once you're starting to like deduct more than the standard deduction, unless it's just from your mortgage, like go talk to someone that's not whoever this, jackass is on LinkedIn or on Instagram.
Yeah, no, it's you're never not gonna. You're like, you do not want to be in a situation like where the IRS is like explain all these deductions, right? And like you can't reasonably explain what you're doing. So
yeah, always operating good faith. Well, anyway, great discussion, Kyle. Any fun plans for the weekend?
Well, my wife's gonna have some fun plans. She's going to this offsite with her company in Orlando. I am watching 3 Kids, so I'll be
she's going to Disney World. Is this her like travel agency planning?
Yeah, her company they go like once a year, and they basically go and like have like a company offsite, and like Disney and Universal, they basically like give them an update on what's going on at the parks. They show them all the new stuff, etc. So she looks forward to it every year, and so obviously I'm not going to not want her to go. I want her to go.
Well, I will actually be at Disneyland this Saturday. My friend from Wharton, his wife is a product manager at Disney, and she designs the rides.
Yeah.
So she got us a free pass, and we get to like go backstage and like see forbidden areas.
Oh, cool. That'd be fun.
So
are you going to be in Disneyland or California Adventure?
I don't know. I think maybe both. One, I don't know. I'm like, I mean, his wife is like she like led the design of like 2 of the new rides. I mean, she's worked at Disney for like 5 or 6 years, and like loves Disney. We were in Tokyo with them. We went on vacation with them to Japan, and she went to Tokyo Disney, and it's like, yeah, I made that ride. Like I made that ride, and we didn't get like the reservation because there's only a certain number of like Disney employees can't just go like every day, right? You have to like book it in advance. So it's going to be 92 degrees this Saturday, which in Southern California is like too hot to go outside. Yeah. So there was openings, and he texted me. He's like, "Hey, you want to go to Disneyland?" So should be a very unique experience. Super fun. I'll report back what I discover from behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, I've always thought they're interesting, right? Because you'll go and you'll like see like they'll build these basically warehouses, right? And they'll put the rides in them and they decorate the outside. So it's all quite elaborate, and I'm sure like it all probably looks very industrial when you're not. I actually was behind the scene once because Splash Mountain broke down, and it was like sitting there for like half an hour, and then they come and they emerge from the. At the time it was like Brer Rabbit and stuff. Now it's like Princess and the Frog. But they came out and they like come out and they're like, "Hey, come with us." And we like go backstage, and there was just like mountains of trash. It was like very like disillusioning. Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, it was like mountains of trash because they take every ounce of trash and just like put it behind the stuff, right? And then we like went through this gate and we were like back in Disneyland. But yeah, behind the gates, it's like it looks totally industrial. And there's like little golf carts. There's like paths that you can like. There was like employees like running to like get to their shift. It was, but yeah, it was tons of trash. That's what I remember. Like there was big piles of trash that they were like trying to get out of the park. You know. So anyway, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, cool. Well, appreciate it, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
And I'm not talking about some $400,000 a year working Wall Street stiff flying first class and being comfortable. I'm talking about liquid. Rich enough, have your own jet. Rich enough not to waste time.